Welcome to Better Every Day. I'm Tom, here with my co-host Kelly, and we're all about turning the best self-improvement books into simple, actionable steps to help you grow and thrive. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon if you're on YouTube so you never miss an episode. All right, let's jump in and get better every day.
All right, let's dive in. We're tackling a classic today, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Over 10 million copies sold, first published in 1937, and still incredibly relevant. So what's the secret sauce? What makes this book so timeless?
Well, you got to think, a book written before World War II, and people are still reading it today. It's pretty amazing. I think Carnegie really hit a nerve. He understood that deep down, we all crave connection. There was actually this survey by the University of Chicago and the YMCA, and get this, understanding human relations was the #2 thing adults wanted to learn more about, second only to health.
Wow, that's fascinating. You'd think with how important relationships are, we'd learn more about them in school, right?
Totally. Years of math and history, but how to build strong relationships. Left to figure it out on our own.
So Carnegie saw this gap, this need, but how did he approach it? Where did he even start?
He started by really digging into human nature. He understood that people, even people who do bad things, are driven by their egos, by this need to feel important.
It's kind of like they're trying to convince themselves as much as anyone else.
Exactly. Think about Al Capone, Two Gun Crowley, notorious criminals. But they saw themselves as good guys. Crowley even wrote a letter while bleeding out from gunshot wounds, saying he had a kind heart.
Wow, it reminds me of that story about President Taft, who refused to take any responsibility for his political downfall. Like, he couldn't even admit he might have made a mistake.
Exactly. It's that need to protect our egos, even when it holds us back.
And Carnegie is saying that if we can recognize this tendency in ourselves and others, we can start to improve our relationships.
Right. He's not condoning bad behavior, but saying, hey, this is how people are wired. And once you understand that, you can start to work with it.
So if understanding human nature is the foundation, what's the first step to building better relationships?
Carnegie believed it all boiled down to making others feel important.
Okay, I can see how that's important, but how do we actually do that?
One of the most powerful ways is through genuine appreciation.
That reminds me of that story about John D. Rockefeller.
Oh, yeah, the one with his business partner.
Exactly. The guy lost $1 million, a huge mistake. And Rockefeller could have blown up, criticized him, made him feel terrible. But instead, he praised him for salvaging what he could.
Can you imagine being that partner? Getting praised after $1 million mistake?
It probably would have made him want to work even harder to make things right.
Totally. It shows that appreciation, even in the face of a setback, can be incredibly motivating.
It's like, instead of tearing someone down, you're building them up.
Exactly. And it strengthens the relationship, even in a tough situation.
That's so powerful. And there's that other story Carnegie tells about Stevie Morris, the blind boy. His teacher recognized his incredible hearing and actually asked him to help find a lost mouse in the classroom.
Oh, I love that story.
It's so touching. It shows that everyone has something to offer, and recognizing that can make all the difference.
Absolutely. We all crave that feeling of being seen, of being appreciated for who we are.
So we've got appreciation as a key way to make people feel important. What other strategies did Carnegie highlight?
Well, another one is so simple, yet so powerful: listening.
Listening.
Yep. Carnegie argued that being a good listener is crucial for building strong relationships. He even tells this funny story about how he was once considered a fascinating conversationalist by this botanist.
Really?
Yeah, and the funny part is he barely said a word during their whole conversation.
That's hilarious. I guess sometimes the best way to connect is to just shut up and let the other person talk.
Right. It reminds me of that quote by Jack Woodford. Few human beings are proof against the implied flattery of rapt attention.
Oh, that's a good one. It's true. When someone really listens to us, it makes us feel valued, like what we're saying actually matters.
Totally. And it makes you think about those times when you're talking to someone and you can tell they're not really listening.
Ugh, the worst. It's like they're just waiting for their turn to speak.
Exactly. It's
Oh.
such a turnoff.
You know, that reminds me of that story from the book about the New York telephone company.
Oh, yeah, with the angry customer?
Yeah. They had this one customer who was constantly complaining, just furious about everything. And instead of arguing with him, they assigned him a representative whose only job was to listen to him vent.
That's brilliant.
Right. And it worked. By simply letting the guy get everything off his chest, they were able to calm him down.
It's amazing how effective that could be.
Sometimes people just need to feel heard before they're willing to even consider a solution.
Totally. It's like by acknowledging their perspective, you're creating space for common ground.
And speaking of common ground, that was another big theme in the book, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Carnegie was all about avoiding arguments and instead finding ways to get people saying yes, yes.
Like starting with points of agreement, building momentum towards a shared understanding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He tells this great story about a white truck salesman who was trying to sell a truck to this customer. And the customer came out with this objection right off the bat, like, I heard these trucks are no good in the mountains. Right. But instead of arguing, the salesman just said, you're absolutely right. Those other trucks, they do struggle in the mountains.
He agreed with him.
Yep. And then he went on to explain how his trucks were specifically designed to handle those conditions.
That's so smart. By agreeing with the customer's initial concern, he disarmed him and opened up the conversation.
Exactly. It's about finding those points of connection, those yes, yes moments that create a foundation for persuasion.
It's so much more effective than just trying to force your point of view on someone.
Absolutely. It's about building rapport, creating a sense of collaboration.
I love that. This is great stuff. We're really starting to uncover the secrets to winning friends and influencing people.
Yeah, and we're just getting started.
Oh, that's right. There's so much more to explore.
We've got tons of great stories and practical strategies to dive into.
Can't wait. All right, welcome back to our deep dive into how to win friends and influence people. We've been talking about these really powerful strategies for making people feel important, like appreciation and listening. And that idea of finding common ground, getting those yes, yes responses.
It's all about building that foundation of trust and understanding.
Exactly. But let's be real, things aren't always smooth sailing. We're not always going to agree with everyone. And sometimes we need to address mistakes, offer constructive criticism,
Oh, absolutely. Disagreements are bound to happen in any relationship.
So how do we navigate those tricky situations?
Well, Carnegie has some brilliant advice for handling criticism. He says that direct criticism rarely works.
What do you mean?
Like coming right out and saying, you did this wrong, or you messed up.
Oh, I see.
It often just leads to defensiveness and resentment.
Makes sense. So what's the alternative?
Carnegie suggests a much more subtle approach. He says, start by praising the things they're doing well.
Okay, so acknowledge their strengths first.
Exactly. And then gently guide them towards improvement.
It's kind of like that saying, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Exactly. By starting with the positive, you create a much more receptive environment for feedback.
That reminds me of that story Carnegie tells about the Kaiser and Prince von Bülow.
Oh, that's a classic.
So the Kaiser had made these, foolish statements, public statements that really angered England. And he wanted von Bülow to take the blame for it.
Talk about a tough spot.
Right. Von Bülow could have easily contradicted him, refused to go along with it.
But instead, he used praise to smooth things over. He acknowledged the Kaiser's authority, implied that he couldn't possibly be responsible for such blunders.
It's amazing how a few well-placed words of praise can completely diffuse a tense situation.
It's about preserving someone's dignity, even when you're addressing a difficult issue.
And it's not about letting things slide. It's about approaching the situation with empathy and understanding.
Exactly. And Carnegie also emphasizes the importance of taking ownership of your own mistakes.
Oh, that's huge. It's so easy to point fingers, but it takes real courage to admit when you're wrong.
Totally. I remember that story from the book about the guy who was furious with this company over a billing error. He was ready to go to war with them.
Oh, I remember that one.
And the company representative, instead of arguing, just said, you're right, we made a mistake and we're so sorry.
And the customer was totally disarmed.
It's like that simple act of humility completely changed the dynamic.
It's like saying, hey, we all make mistakes, which makes the other person feel less defensive.
Absolutely. It's a powerful way to build trust and resolve conflict.
So we've talked about handling criticism, but Carnegie also talks a lot about encouragement, right?
Oh, definitely. He believed in praising effort and progress, even if the results aren't perfect yet.
It's about fostering that growth mindset, inspiring people to keep striving for improvement.
Exactly. Think about the story of Charles Dickens.
Oh, yeah, he had a tough childhood, right?
He did. But when one of his stories got published, even though he didn't get paid for it, the encouragement from the editor changed his whole life.
It's amazing how a few words of praise can have such a profound impact.
Absolutely. It's like giving someone permission to believe in themselves and their dreams.
And that applies to everyone, not just aspiring novelists. We all need that encouragement to keep growing and learning.
Totally. Whether it's at work, in our relationships, or just in our personal lives.
So we've covered criticism, encouragement. What other strategies does Carnegie offer for influencing people effectively?
Well, one that I find really fascinating is the art of making tasks appealing.
Making tasks appealing.
Yeah. It's not about manipulation, but about framing requests in a way that highlights the benefits for the other person.
So like instead of saying do this, you're saying here's why doing this would be awesome for you.
Exactly. You're shifting the focus from what you need to how it benefits them.
That's brilliant.
Think about how Woodrow Wilson approached cabinet appointments. He had this way of making people feel like they were doing him a favor by accepting a challenging role.
It's like he appealed to their sense of importance, made them feel valued.
Exactly, which made them much more receptive to his request.
It's a reminder that even in positions of authority, influence comes from understanding what motivates others.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes a little bit of showmanship can go a long way.
Showmanship? What do you mean?
Like, think about that story about the salesman who was trying to sell cold cream. Instead of just talking about it, he dumped 32 jars of competing brands on the client's desk.
Oh, wow. That's a bold move.
Right. It definitely got his attention.
And then he could explain why his cold cream was superior.
It's a great example of using a bit of drama to highlight your point.
I love that. It's like you got to make it memorable, right?
Exactly. You want to capture their imagination, make them really see the value in what you're offering.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. We've covered so much ground already, from the importance of appreciation and listening to handling criticism effectively. And that idea of making tasks appealing, framing things in a way that benefits the other person.
It's amazing how much practical wisdom is packed into this book.
Right, and there's one more principle I'm really curious to unpack, the motivational power of a challenge.
Oh, that's a good one.
It seemed kind of counterintuitive at first, like how can a challenge be motivating?
Well, I think it taps into something deep within us, that desire to achieve, to excel. Carnegie believed that people are inherently driven to push themselves.
And that by tapping into that drive, you can unlock incredible motivation.
Exactly. It's not about forcing people, it's about inspiring them.
That reminds me of the story about Charles Schwab, the steel magnate, and those underperforming steelworkers.
Oh yeah, the one where he just wrote a number on the floor.
Exactly. Instead of yelling at them or threatening them, he took a piece of chalk and wrote 6.
Representing the number of heats the previous shift had produced.
And the night shift saw that 6 and they were like, game on.
They wanted to beat the previous team's output, prove they were better.
It's so simple, yet so brilliant. It wasn't about punishment. It was about tapping into their competitive spirit, their desire to prove themselves.
And it worked.
It makes you realize that sometimes the most effective motivation comes from within.
Exactly. It's about framing tasks as opportunities for growth and achievement, not burdens or obligations.
It's like turning everyday activities into mini competitions.
Right. Imagine setting a challenge for your team to exceed last quarter's sales figures, or encouraging your child to improve their reading speed by setting a timer.
It's like gamifying life.
In a way, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's about tapping into that inner drive we all have to be our best.
And sometimes all it takes is a little nudge in the right direction.
A little spark to ignite that fire.
This deep dive into how to win friends and influence people has been incredible.
It really has.
We've uncovered so many timeless principles that can be applied to all areas of our lives, from our personal relationships to our professional endeavors.
It's amazing how a book written almost a century ago can still be so relevant today.
Carnegie's insights into human nature are timeless, and his practical strategies for building stronger relationships are just as applicable now as they were back then.
It's a true classic for a reason.
As we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. If you could master just one of the principles we've discussed today, which one would have the biggest impact on your life right now?
Which one resonates most deeply with you and the challenges you're facing?
Take some time to reflect on that question. Choose one principle to focus on this week and see how applying Carnegie's wisdom can transform your interactions and create more positive and fulfilling relationships.
It's a journey of learning and growth.
And remember, keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep diving deep.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Better Every Day. We hope you found some actionable insights to help you on your self-improvement journey. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on future deep dives. And if you're on YouTube, hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, small steps every day lead to big changes. See you next time.